This is the Fox News Rundown Extra. I'm Dave Anthony. Today, we hope you learned something about something still relatively new and maybe misunderstood. The Space Force. President Trump got made fun of when he first started talking about it, but with Congress's approval, it is now the sixth branch of the U.S. military, born out of the Air Force. Now, that was in 2019. Last month, after President Biden took office, the Space Force got renewed attention when some Republicans complained White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki mocked the Space Force, responding to a reporter's question. Now, she later clarified that President Biden fully supports the Space Force, and that is where we began our conversation with General David Thompson, Vice Chief of Space Operations for the U.S. Space Force. He was on the rundown the other day, and today there's some more of what he told us in our quest to better understand what this new military branch actually does. Thank you for listening, as always. And now General David Thompson on the Fox News Rundown Extra.
Be part of your program.
Well, thanks. This is going to be going out in our Rundown podcast this week, so we're excited to have a chance to go a little in depth on what the Space Force is, and certainly something that got a little attention a few weeks back. So,
Absolutely.
I wanted to be certain that I have the title correct. General David Thompson, Vice Chief of Space Operations, U.S. Space Force. Am I on with that?
Correct. That's correct.
Okay. And you can hear me okay?
I can hear you fine, yes.
All right. I think we might have a slight delay, but that's not an issue for us. I think I think we have a pretty good quality link up, so that's a good start. All right, General, if you're ready, we can get started.
I'm ready when you are.
Thank you. Joining us on the Fox News Rundown is General David Thompson. He's Vice Chief of Space Operations for the U.S. Space Force. General, thank you very much for your time.
It's a pleasure to be here this morning.
Well, we had just a couple of weeks ago, it was a thing that sort of blew up out of the White House when the press secretary was seen as, by some people, mocking the Space Force. And then people demanded apologies from the White House. I wanted to get your thoughts first on the Space Force as the new Biden administration takes over. Do you feel that you have 100% backing of the White House?
Dave, we do. First of all, I have to say I think the toughest job in media is probably that role of the spokesperson for the White House. Not only do you have to be fully conversant on dozens of issues that you prepare for every day, you're liable to questions that perhaps you haven't been tracking from 1,000 other possibilities. My suspicion is that that she just got caught off guard a little bit, and I think you saw in the response after that, very quickly the White House, the president, the vice president came fully on board with support for the Space Force. So I think we can give Ms. Psaki a little bit of grace, and I think it's pretty clear that we enjoy the support of the current administration.
The Space Force was established in 2019, so you've already turned over a year old, correct?
Correct.
And now, as you continue to put together your operation, how many troops do you have currently in the Space Force?
Yeah, so we're made up of actually a number of different categories of folks. The first, and those people think first and foremost, is military members who are wearing a Space Force uniform. Today, that number is on the order of 4,300. Most of us, like myself, have spent some part of a career doing space operations inside the Air Force, and we've transferred in. There are about 2,000 more who are still waiting to transfer in. But at the same time, we have another 6,000 Air Force civilians. They're civilians serving alongside of us who are part of the Space Force today. They don't wear the uniform, but they're a vital part of the team. And then we have yet another 6,000 or more Air Force members who are helping us to perform Air Force missions. We perform space operations. We build and field the satellites that we use to conduct our missions. We have intelligence professionals. We have cybersecurity experts. But the Air Force continues to provide for us logistic support and personnel support and base operating support and security and many of the things that the Air Force has provided for space missions in the past. They'll continue in the future. So people supporting space missions and conducting space missions today, we're well over 12,000, approaching 15,000, but about 4,000 of us today wearing a uniform that says U.S. Space Force.
Okay. Now, obviously, you were born out of the the U.S. Air Force. You were part of Air Force Space Command. Will you have less Air Force linkage as you move forward and more uniformed Space Force officers?
So we have a very unique relationship, unique to all the services. You know, the Air Force, to the most part, is self-sustaining, does it very well. The Army is the same way. The Navy is the same way. They depend on each other to operate together. The Marine Corps is somewhat self-sustaining, but depends a little bit on the Navy. Our relationship with the Air Force is much closer, and frankly, we require the Air Force to provide a significant amount of our support. In order to be both efficient and effective to create this new service as efficiently as we could, we have been very focused solely on space missions. As I said, we conduct space operations. We fly satellites, GPS satellites, missile warning satellites, communication satellites. We own people who build and field those satellites. We own intelligence experts. We own cyber experts. Those are the only experts we have in the Space Force today. We will continue for a long time to rely on the Air Force for the rest of those other functions and support functions. We don't have a plan right now to replace Air Force members in those functions. So we're going to have a very close and symbiotic relationship with the Air Force for years to come.
Satellite technology is evolving, right? We're getting smaller and smaller satellites, and they're obviously more important than ever before as countries compete in space, right?
They are. In fact, today the United States Space Force tracks over 26,000 objects in space. Some of them are satellites, some of them are bits of junk, some of them are old rocket bodies. About 1,500 or so have been operating, and that's been the standard for years. But if you look at the future, you look at Starlink is launching 60 satellites at a time, very small, very focused. They have a vision for a constellation of thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of satellites. Many others are doing the same thing. And so the trend here is smaller satellites, individual satellites that do less, but large constellations that can do more as a constellation. So the trend is smaller satellites, more and more and more of them, to provide, I'll call it, more ubiquitous capability all the way to individuals around the world.
When people think of space for a long time, immediately NASA comes to mind. Obviously, SpaceX in the last couple of years as well. How closely does the Space Force work with NASA and a company like SpaceX?
Yeah, we work closely with both, and you're absolutely right. People often think of NASA when they think space. NASA's job is exploration, discovery, human space flight, some environmental monitoring and things like that. That's what NASA does and people see every day. The Space Force's job is focused on the military operations, and support to military operations. Surprisingly, not as many Americans know, but the GPS constellation. You think about how many times a day or a week or a month you follow the blue dot on your cell phone.
Sure.
That's provided by the U.S. Space Force through the GPS constellation. We provide timing signals that synchronize financial networks, commercial networks, your civil aviation safety networks. We provide comms worldwide for our military forces. Just in January, we talked about the 1-year anniversary of the ballistic missile attack on Al Asad Air Base. We fly the satellites that monitor to the world to provide warning of missile attack. We keep track of all those objects in space. And so our focus is on supporting our military forces, providing those sorts of capabilities for our forces, for our national leaders, even for civil society. But we share a lot of technology with NASA, but we do have two distinct separate missions.
You have a key role in the intelligence community now. I mean, you have a seat at the table with some of, obviously, the most important intelligence people in the country. What does Space Force add to the conversation?
Yeah, so in January, we just became the 18th member of the intelligence community. But we've been involved with the intelligence community for years. We are a close partner to the National Reconnaissance Office, which is intelligence-focused national security space organization. First of all, we provide about 1/3 of their workforce from the U.S. Space Force. The second is the same thing. We share technology. We operate together. We provide launch services for them to deliver their satellites to orbit. And increasingly, we work with them in how to use our space systems together to mutual benefit, to collect the intelligence, the information that we need to provide it to forces. And we're in a position now where we have to become a demanding customer of the intelligence community, because we now have to understand the possible threats that exist to our satellites, what we need to do to protect them, how we might operate in the face of attack. So in addition to providing intelligence and being a member of the intelligence community in that sense for years, we now have to be a demanding customer of the intelligence community to support our mission in conflict.
There is a lot of focus on China being a big threat to the U.S. in a lot of different ways, including cybersecurity. They, of course, have missiles. They, of course, have a lot of the technology we have. What threat do you focus on when you consider China?
So China is clearly a competitor for the nation and absolutely a potential adversary. The concern we have about China is they've been watching us for years. We are the greatest in the world at space. We provide tremendous space capabilities for the nation, for our soldiers, sailors, and airmen and Marines. China has been watching that. They understand how effective our military forces are with those space systems, and they have been making plans since as long ago as 2007 to deny us the use of those space systems in conflict. And so in that year, they launched a missile from the surface of the Earth and destroyed one of their own satellites, demonstrating that they have an offensive space weapon. They have jammers that interrupt our communications links and prevent us from providing data from our satellites to forces on the ground. They can dazzle and blind our sensors. In fact, both Russia and China, by the end of this decade, will have the ability, both in a reversible sense, jamming and blinding, and in a non-irreversible sense, direct kinetic attack, they're going to have the ability to attack all of our space systems in all of the orbital regimes we operate in. So we can't simply let that happen. We have to understand that threat and develop capabilities and tactics and other things to ensure that does not happen.
In the future, are we going to have sophisticated weapons in space, stationed in space, able to target other objects either in space or on Earth?
Well, I can't really speculate too much on that. That's certainly a possibility for the future. That's certainly a decision of our national leadership, and it's subject to many factors. But I will say this. There's no question that that's the intent of China and Russia. And for sure, we have to develop the ability to protect ourselves and defend ourselves from those sorts of weapons, those sorts of possibilities, those sorts of attacks. And there's a whole host of ways we might want to do that in the future. In the ground, through cyberspace, through other combat arms, and certainly potentially also in space.
You've been recruiting to try to grow your own force, obviously, with new recruits. I'll give you the chance to sell it. When you try to get new members and you have people who are considering a career or a life or service in the military, what would you tell them to consider Space Force over the other branches?
So I would tell them two things. First of all, I would tell them that if you're looking for a challenge, if you're looking to enter into a new frontier, so to speak, if you are interested in advanced technology, if you're interested in inventing the future. 100 years ago, we had this brand new technology called the airplane. And young, adventuresome, energetic, passionate individuals went out and figured out what it meant to fly, how to improve the airplane, how it could be used in many, many different ways. I will tell you 100 years later, that's exactly what the Space Force is about. Deciding what the future needs to look like in space, understanding the challenges in space, building capabilities, training yourself, training forces to protect the nation in space. All of those things that we've thought about in the past as we've understood the potential and the challenge and new frontiers. We are again, as we were 60 years ago. Space is a new frontier. And if you want to challenge, if you want to challenge yourself, if you want to invent the future, come join the Space Force.
General David Thompson, Vice Chief of Space Operations for the U.S. Space Force. Thank you very much for your time today. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Dave.
General, is there anything we missed, or did we cover it, you think?
I think we're okay. Let me look at my experts. You're obviously a professional. I wish I delivered a couple of things better, but if you're satisfied, I think I'm satisfied.
I wouldn't question yourself. You sounded great. I thank you very much.
Okay. Anytime.
Appreciate it, General. And thanks to everyone else listening. Thank you.
Okay. Have a great day.
All right. You too.
You've been listening to the Fox News Rundown. Stay up to date by subscribing to this podcast at foxnewspodcasts.com. And for up-to-the-minute news, go to foxnews.com. If you're using anything other than Indeed for your hiring, you are wasting your time. Hire great people faster with Indeed. Only pay for results and get back time in your schedule. Indeed.com is the hiring site that helps you find quality candidates with Indeed Instant Match. Indeed searches through millions of resumes in their database to help show you great candidates instantly, so you can do the part you really need faster, meeting and hiring great people. Unlike some hiring sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility, delivering a quality shortlist faster. With Indeed, there are no long-term contracts. You can pause your account at any time, and you only pay for what you need. With Instant Match, you see a list of great candidates with zero wait. And Indeed delivers 4 times more hires than all other job sites combined, according to Talent Nest. Get started right now with a free $75 credit to upgrade your job post at Indeed.com/Fox. Get a free $75 credit at Indeed.com/Fox. Indeed.com/Fox. Offer valid through March 31st. Terms and conditions apply.
I'm Guy Benson. Join me weekdays at 3 p.m. Eastern as we break down the biggest stories of the day with some of the biggest newsmakers and guests. Listen live on the Fox News app or get the free podcast at GuyBensonShow.com.
Listen to be part of the conversation with me, Brian Kilmeade. I'll talk about the biggest stories of the day and get your take along with some of the biggest newsmakers around. Listen live on the Fox News app or get the podcast at BrianKilmeadShow.com.